Often in the news and in the media, we are given a narrative that simply doesn't add up. They can even show you video footage that simply makes no sense. The video footage has been tampered with. A good example of this is in 9/11, where they showed you an aeroplane actually flying into a building and exploding and crashing on the inside of the building. Well, we know that this is not possible, that the aeroplane would crash and explode on the outside of the building, not on the inside. So the narrative simply doesn't add up. And one way they get away with this is by refocusing your attention on the wrong thing. So for example, it's like someone who takes you out for a cheap meal of French fries, and they just flooded with tomato ketchup, tomato sauce, in the hope that you don't see that the potatoes are rotten. And a good example of this is Wolfie6020. Now in Wolfie's presentation, Wolfie gave us a presentation of a HUD display that simply didn't add up. So first Wolfie gave us some tomato ketchup on his rotten potatoes, right? He showed us this is the tomato sauce, right? And this is the rotten potatoes. In his presentation, Wolfie said that the HUD display showed the horizon was below the true horizon.
And that means the horizon is also below true level.
The question is, if the horizon is curved, how can that plane be level with the horizon?
And that means the horizon is also below true level. Below true level. Below true level.
So what we're saying is that his HUD display shows a curved Earth, and that the horizon is below eye level. In other words, this is what he would see from the cockpit. In other words, if the Earth is curved to the front and the back, it must also be curved the same left and right. Look at this image. That's what a pilot would have to see. So let's keep in mind that if an airplane sees the horizon in front of itself, right? If that airplane rotates on its y-axis, the ball can't stay in the same position. The airplane has to rotate all three axes so that the horizon can stay in view. And that's the problem. That's how we know Wolfie's he's just a con man, and a stupid one at that. So let's have a look at another issue. If the aeroplane sees the horizon in front of it, what is the aeroplane's attitude and its altitude in connection with the horizon? In other words, if another aeroplane was flying 60 or 70 kilometers behind that aeroplane must also see the horizon in front of it. How can the aeroplane behind have the same altitude and attitude and have the same vision of the horizon in front of itself? How can that HUD display the same? There's only one way, is that the Earth must be flat. The ground underneath it must be flat, so that both these aeroplanes can have the same reading. In other words, the altitude and attitude towards the horizon must be the same for both planes. Now, if we add an air traffic control tower, that traffic control tower has to have the same reading for altitude and attitude towards itself and both aeroplanes. Right? So what is the distance that the traffic controller can see? Well, for hundreds of kilometers. Right? So therefore, the attitude and altitude must be the same for the control tower and for the aeroplane, for both aeroplanes. For that aeroplane at the back to see the horizon at the same attitude and at the same altitude, it would see the plane in front flying at an angle. Well, because it's flying over a ball. So, for a control tower, how does a control tower maintain altitude and attitude for all three aeroplanes if they're flying over a curve? Cannot happen. That's why we know Wolfie stuff is nonsense. He's lying. The control tower must have the same altitude and attitude for all three aeroplanes if it's to control all three aeroplanes. The measurement must be the same for all four elements, the three aeroplanes and the traffic controller. So Wolf is saying that his attitude indicator is different. In other words, the higher he goes, at some point the horizon line drops below. And the reason why is because he's flying higher than normal aircraft. In other words, normal passenger aircraft. Well, then that brings up a whole lot of other issues. In other words, his altitude and his attitude is measured against what? Means his wind resistance. In other words, as the airplane takes off, right, its altitude and the attitude is measured against what? The horizon line, which is flat, but he's flying over a ball. The wind resistance on the plane then is against the plane. Right. Now another area where Wolfie's stuff just simply didn't add up is the moon.
That means the horizon is also below true level. Below true level.
And this is where Wolfie is just downright is a dumbass. How can the aeroplane bank to its right and still keep the horizon in a straight line if he's supposed to be flying over a ball? How ridiculous is this? This is just so stupid. For him to present this and say this shows that the earth is a curve is just outright stupid. He's a dumbass.
So there you have confirmation once again that the horizon did not rise to eye level and the moon itself was below eye level as it was setting. So it is clearly not moving in a circle above a flat earth.
So what's the issue? So Wolfie doesn't see the issue. His airplane is banking right, yet the horizon is flat. How can the airplane bank right over a ball and still maintain the horizon in front of it? The airplane levels out and the horizon is still front. That means the ground underneath must be flat. And its altitude, its attitude stays the same before the bank and after the bank. That means he must be flying over a cylinder. How can the horizon stay flat? Because if it's a ball, right, if his airplane banks right, the horizon also has to shift with the airplane. The horizon would have to roll to its right. If the plane turns to its right, the horizon would have to roll to its right, and the plane would have to correct all three axes. Right. That's why we know the Earth's flat. An airplane doesn't do this. It banks, it turns, and it levels to the same altitude and attitude that it had before it started turning. Therefore the ground must be flat. Then Wolfie adds the moon. You see, for the moon to move level with the horizon is flat in Wolfie's video footage. In fact, Wolfie proved that the Earth was flat in his video footage. He just doesn't realize it. Wolfie's footage proved the Earth is flat. Because if the plane banks to its right, the moon will move in a straight line, which happened in his video footage. He's supposed to be flying over a ball. So what would happen? Think about it logically. If the plane banks to its right, the horizon has to roll to its right. Remember, and he's looking at the moon. So from the perspective of the pilot, what would happen? The moon would have to arc, cannot move in a straight line. The moon has to arc, the same arc as the aeroplane's turning. Right, so as the plane banks, the moon cannot move because the horizon is also rolling to its right, and therefore the moon would arc in a circle. Right. Wolfie's video footage proved that the earth was flat. He's just a dumbass. So one of the world's most notorious rotten potatoes is this man, Albert Einstein. The ketchup on Albert Einstein, the tomato sauce on him, was that he was a genius. He was a man, he was so clever that we could never hope to even understand his mathematical equations. And it's rubbish. So Albert Einstein said, no visible optical experiment could be done to prove the motion of the earth. Remember, the earth's supposed to be moving through space and rotating east. His stuff, what he was saying is nonsense. It's easy to disprove him. For example, how does this simple picture prove that Albert Einstein was a liar? If this fence that these birds are landing on is lined up to north to south, well, if this fence is lined up north to south, how can the birds land on it the same, easterly and the westerly direction? In other words, if the birds coming from the east and the birds are coming from the west can both land on this fence, tells it that the earth's not spinning. Right. So how then does this simple fence with birds sitting on it disprove Albert Einstein and prove him to be a liar? Well, if this fence is lined up north and south, that means birds flying from the east and west cannot fly at and land on the fence at the same speed, because they would be flying at different speeds and covering different distances. So the birds flying westerly would be flying backward and forward slower so that they could land on the fence. The birds flying easterly would have to fly faster so that they could land on the fence if the fence is moving. So they'll say, no, well, the birds are spinning with the earth. Well, let's have a look at that. Let's just say you'd spent your whole life in a box. All you could see was look up, and you could look at the birds, and they said to you, you were moving. Well, how could you determine then, just by looking at the birds, that you're not moving? Because if you were moving and the birds slowed down to land on the wall on the easterly side, you would actually see the birds flying backwards. But the fact is that the birds would land on all four walls equally from all directions would tell you that you're not moving. It's common sense. So Albert Einstein was lying. It just means that you have to pay attention to the world around you. If you pay attention to the natural world, you'll see that we're not spinning. For example, fish eagles. If the fish is moving with the earth, it means the eagle flying in the direction of the motion of the fish would have to fly faster. The eagle in the opposite direction, his distance and his speed would have to be changing. So Albert Einstein stuff, this simply doesn't add up. So the next bit, I want you just to have a look and think, and you have to reason and think this stuff through yourself. And I hope this makes you think. Cheers and thanks for watching.